To you some kind of I should challenge you. I'm not going to talk to you what each of you personally can do, but how in a normal, effective, and modern and whatever you can stay fit as a citizen. This sort of approach I want to offer to you. Otherwise, they will give you this picture of the world that we could further discuss or argue. When I began to work for the department, I didn't work there long. Well, I am at the department and a door is opened and the dean opens the door and he says, "Look, there's nobody there." He closes the door and leaves. Well, it seems to me when we say that there's no civil society, this is the problem of what we approach with when maybe we are looking for a key we lost elsewhere under the bright light. Maybe we use a different language. Maybe the values which we prepared to defend are somewhat unlike what they want. It seems to me very important. That's why I would like to say that for me, civil society is not a diagnosis, it's a condition at each given moment in time. In this country or in other country, there is an even number of civic authors, organizations, initiatives that people come up to, values, there's certain practices that have been reflected like this. When people, work for the interests of the public and where they correlate their life with the life of a country. Okay, let's think that we are independent in Russia. We carried out a study and there's a published of the portrait of Russia. Just a moment, I will speak to the sound technicians to remove the echo, sorry.
России самостоятельной, потому что этот язык нам непонятен, или мы не понимаем, как могут люди выходить с защитой таких ценностей, как, например, невозможно жить в мире, где совершенно нет игры, или делай то, во что ты веришь, или верни себе город, или...
Get the city back. I want to find like-minded people. These are neighborhood communities and they take care of very important things for themselves. But they, for example, can come to an agreement and begin to do, say, physical training classes in a rural school. Because, for example, for a year this vacation was open. Or they can exchange, and this is Darmark it's called, and so on. When they bring together all kinds of oaks and apple trees and plant them in empty places, or mid-managers who at nights repair the road signs that are they're not just people who protest because they plant, but they immediately cut down woods, but they immediately replant it, and they brought together the efforts, and one woman looks after 5 children, the other 4 mothers go to work. This is an element of self-organization, autonomy, that seems so important to me, because this is a resource. This is a cube, which can later become something that would build like a Lego our future. On the other hand, they don't use democracy language or human rights language. At that time, they are carrier both of the value and democratic practices and human rights activism. The second case I wish to share with you is as follows. We once thought that we would care for this. People, as seemingly through fate, it was important to go for human rights, treat human rights like a sort of a disease. This is some kind of disease of an elderly academic community, marginals, who speak a foreign language and nobody knows anywhere, who were brought to Russia together in the package of modernization. It turned out that nobody ever tried, together with them, to say that human rights is an everyday language which you can use to describe your ill-being. Maybe what they do, they actually are human rights activists, but in the spheres that we don't think are mandatory for human rights activism. Whereas human rights activists, it's a kind of, like a musical ear. When you hear those who were humiliated by human dignity, no matter whether you like the situation or not, whatever. So we came up with an idea to consider the situation of office slavery. All offices in Russia are total territories where people are being humiliated through different practices. They have a special way of programmers cannot go back to their workplace. Their belongings are just, you can get in the morning, in the evening you might hear you have no personal time because you have like team building, and it seemed incredible because very often people responded to that. The sensitivity to that there's something inhuman practice, that it's certainly there, and it turned out that they were surprised to find out that this is the language of human rights activism. I suppose it's one of those important models now that HRs in Perm now try to teach others HRs how you should sort of attune people to at least be perceiving human rights aspects in office life. I suppose it's right. Then it seems very strange that people stop thinking about the future. In this situation, yes, they do like they, together with their neighbors. That is a rare thing. I've seen it with my own eyes. In one house, allowed the other residential hunt to put in place the garbage container while they were having repairs for their car park. All those who know these housing wars, they realize it's a fantastic element of being ready for concluding a contract. And they do things. This is something special. For some reason, they don't speak about the future. And it's impossible to make peace to speak about this and this negotiability. And in summer we had urban festival, Mosti Bridges, something typically urban, typically summer festival. And we thought whether the city is commensurate to the talk about the future. We wanted to identify the micro trends. Many of you have heard the book. Piena is a well-known political scientist who identified microtrends who lead to major changes. So we suggested we should hold this all-city discussion seeking to identify microtrends. We were shocked, amazed by what people came up with. Realtors came and said, look, there's a microtrend, people are so tired of not being able to be fully responsible for their flat. If something goes wrong, they will be held accountable for some disrepair, and then a house will built next to them, and they will no longer see the garden and the cost of our. They begin to sell their flats and rent the flats. This is the macro trend we see. And after that, we try to understand what does it mean for the future. When realtors, I would put it this way, a very specific kind of business, certainly not with the Soviet roots, as you can imagine. We had exchange offices. They say, but this is emergence of property ownership. And we can hear them say, yes, first of all, this is the market of property ownership. And secondly, people treat it as property, not just like something that they possess for a while. And we realize we see a very special reflection about the future, what the future will be built of, future will be built of, future will be built of, future will be built of. This is very important. People are creating something like oxygen tents, some kind of space where you come. And it's not that they love you, but everybody realizes that you're human, you know? That you are probably reasonable, sensible, that you could be talked to, not having a scandal with. So you can use arguments and listen to arguments. And this space, we can't create it. For me, civic pragmatism is a very important thing, because you need to find a way. What I need to say is that this saves us from being too squeamish about our own guilt, unhappy experiences, and indeed the conversation I offer to you is something that something must be done. And that's why I call it civic style at large, in a society of strangers, of people who hold different views. Everybody has the special scale how we make the difference in our sensitivity, where we see real things and non-real, our own values that we entertain. A year ago, we held a meeting in Braley in our town. It was because of utilities, and the Green parties who defended the municipal forests, and just freedom of space, anti-government, anti-governor, and it was before the 9th of May, before the 1st of May rather. And people came to this, they realized that opposite them there are one of them two columns, out of which once the rally, they began to do the orders for once every 7 minutes, who would tell us nasty things about organizers. It's the first time I ever faced it. I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't know what you could do in this situation. But what is important here is this. There were a lot of people who were against rallies in modern town. And there are those who believe that this rally was for wrong causes, but the society split. And those who thought that this sort of way of acceptable.
Вот.
And so this was the question, if such a means was to be accepted. So there was a question if the style is acceptable. So I think that the question of style, or the civic style, acquires importance. Big style is about logic and the values which we are proponents of, which we're trying to actualize. Why did I speak about the big style? The big style, but you know, there are big style in the arts, the Baroque or Classicism or the Empire style. A situation whereas the grand style or the expression or the actual themes or topics and the subjects are in harmony with each other. The grand styles, in this sense, is the expression which we understand as some sort of an artistic unity. To have a style is to be definitive, to have some sort of a manifestation. To have a grand style is not just to have a grand idea, but also to live up to it, to actualize it one's life in harmony with this idea. It was not accidental that I spoke about the style. I think that in many cases the grand style, according to Spengler, is the metaphysical perception of the form. It does not depend on. It creates a format. The ability to work a style, when it is big, it is like a metaphysical element. In this sense, we're usually speaking about the big Perm civic style. And those who know something about the human rights activism in Perm, we are always called crazy. We are often we are really a technology and civic cooperation minded city, Perm. And in my view, when people come to learn this from us, they can feel this style, the style which people wish to follow. And I think that when we believe that something has to stay after us, is it the gesture or the words or the style of discussion, or an ability to conduct a dialogue, lifestyle, rules of conduct. That is why I love this school, because I think that this school definitely is creating the golden middle of some grand style, the style of discussion which can then be reorganized. I think that this is of paramount importance. I believe that style can be reproduced. critics tend to talk to critics. Authors tend to talk to authors. Commentators like to talk to the commentators. I'm very much discouraged by the fact that that the people who were quite democratic and modernization-minded even 5 years ago, reform-minded 5 years ago, and we were talking about focus groups, interests, and so on, are only using one black and white, or they're using two paints, the black and the white, and this is the simplified view of the reality. And the samurais of the regime is a very widespread concept, whereby some people who serve this regime narrow their world outlook. And they do that with the only purpose to survive under this regime. I'm very glad that I know this school because this school provided me with a metaphor. The perception of a patriarchal view, the orthodoxy, is first and foremost to be something and to represent something in this crazy world. I think that what we see is a great disparity between the values and the style. And often we're only seeing or hearing the curses. The discussion, the art of discussion is waning. If we believe that the style does play a role, if we agree that the grand style is important, then you may at least respect me for the way I say something. I think that we will have to restructure ourselves, and I think that the style does not perish without trace. I think that the grand style is I think that this school by Mamardashvili is what I find in it, an important form, a basis, which makes more conspicuous what I do in my life. Mamardashvili has an article about Proust. And he wrote, the dead is something that is not just the dead is not just something which is not alive, but it is something which is next to you and that you have not understood or that you have not appropriated. It is the ability to see around yourself, to create yourself through the form. Why am I writing about this? Because I think that this is the Alexander Arkhangelsky uses the metaphor of red buttons. We think that we can stop, that we can take off and land in 1 minute, and we don't feel that we are thinking about the future. Our perception of what is necessary is often obscured by the fact that we have to react to others. The reaction, pushing the red button, becomes the part of our life to such an extent that we're no longer interested in the substance, and we're then more interested in the reaction. We don't know what to be done with the school, but it is not possible to be repeating like a mantra that we have to reform the school. When I'm talking about the school, I mean the education. I mean the educational establishment, or indeed the important topic of dealing away with the parochial nature in Russia, of life in Russia. Or when we speak about the security, yes, security is important. What is security? We don't know what is danger. We don't know what are the security measures. We don't know how much money we will have to pay for it. All of this is under the hood of the information security. I agree that the level of the so-called aggressive consumption of information is harmful. The exchange of empty rhetoric in the social networks shows that people have often do not think about cultivating a style in themselves. So I think that being idle is also a hypnotic type of influence that the authorities of different kind exert upon us. So we have to realize that this sense of timelessness is that while we have many things in our baggage that the importance is to be commensurate to the humans, because we are repeating the mantras. I was a part of the Strategy 2020 development, and I think that it is the recipe which has not been used does not mean that it was a right recipe or a formula. So, the grand style is the responsibility for the autonomy. If I think about the multitude of errors that have been made, the mistakes that we have made, I start feeling depressed. When I think about the opportunities in front of us, I am not very much elated. But it is not possible to live under this burden. So I would like to offer an idea of the life commensurate with the new things coming around us, using curiosity as a resource, as a key resource. Because the place where you are may not be the center of the world, but it is in itself important that you stand in this place. So this is a prerequisite for developing a style. This is an attempt to understand what the social and economic opportunities are around you. Not so much being dependent on the past or trying to look into the future, but rather to try, cultivate, and create some style within yourself in the circumstances that you have been given. With that said, it is also an attempt to see what can be done at the uppermost limit of the possible. Because we're either investing or we're just lowering the rank. The grand style is some sort of a hard currency. It is a hard currency that can be used on any territory in any geographical location. You may like or dislike what I am saying, but it is an important piece. The borders of functionality. What are the elements of a grand style for me personally? When we look and when we try to empower the growth points, when we're using this as a resource. And in this sense, the position of a victim, or to use the repressions as a certification of my validity is not what I need. I'm not canon meat, in Napoleon's words, and nobody can take me as hostage. I shall be acting in exactly the way I believe it is necessary. Ask me, how did I vote? I will tell you. In Perm, there are 30,000 people destroyed the ballots. And these 30,000 people who destroyed their ballots is an important thing, because they acted the way they believe it. To me, the elections are an important public institution. And it is not just a question of who won. What happens in this party? And going to vote is a part of my identity. But in this particular case, I did not have a choice. I felt myself as I could not support Yabloko, and I could not support Batnas, and I could not support Mr. Maltsev. So I wrote destroyed in all the boxes. What I did, that we can apply the same rules. Solidarity is when we make priorities, when we can agree on something that is important. And when we're taken as hostages, then we are supporting those whom we respect. We must never allow for the human dignity to be trampled. even the personal dignity of our enemy. And let us remember Chulpan Khamatova was vilified because she supported Mr. Putin. On the one hand, she is, and when I was saying that she must not support anybody, she could not reply to me. And I know that for a public person, this was important. This insensitivity to humiliation, the insensitivity to trampling over personal dignity is indeed detrimental to our society. But at the same time, I certainly believe that I can show and make my point and explain that I am not to be trampled with. You humiliated, if you see somebody, the grand style is about building your own agenda, making yourself an element and not succumbing to the role of a minuscule piece in the oppressive state machinery. We believe that the grand style is that space of curiosity and honesty. The grand style also includes the immunity to excessive enthusiasm. We stop being responsible for the entire earth. We stop trying to seem that we're responsible for the fates of the world. We know that others have the right for independent sessions. In the relations with the administrative resource, what we're trying to do, the grand style is an ability to cooperate, but not to drink vodka together, to have the distance, to keep the honorable distance between yourselves and those who are viewed by you as the representatives of the state machinery. What was most important to me was to turn the black square and to make human equal to that figurine of power. And the people who are perceiving the state as a service provider would be a lot better off than those which perceive the state of some Leviathan. According to some of the administrative reforms, it is possible to move a step towards the abolition of the so-called registration or propiska in Russia. So what we have to do is to use every instrument to move our values forward. Trying to profess the grand style is extremely useful. We're paying for the grand style, and sometimes this cost can be quite high. Because sometimes we're paying for the grand style with the loss of friendship or the loss of support. But if the particular relations run contrary to what you believe to be your personal grand style, then you have to sacrifice these relations. You should not tolerate the scoundrels. You should not allow for scoundrels to multiply. I think it is high time to do it in our country, in our region, in our city. I think that being lucid is a choice. You don't have to make an exploit, but you should reserve yourself from villainy.